we deal with people, with adults, very difficult to correct these kind of things. And the earlier the damage, the more difficult the difficulty is to correct it. If the damage was in very young age, very difficult, because his basic inner self-image and self-esteem is damaged, right? Either by being spoiled or by not being accepted all the time. They want me to succeed. If I don't succeed, I'm nobody for them. You know, sometimes they found out that they were born kids with fantastic IQ, geniuses. So the parents thought, all right, now I have a chance to grow at my home Einstein, all right? So he invested in fantastically. So you see a kid with unbelievable IQ, with parents giving him everything and pushing him. At some point, all of a sudden, there are a few cases like that. He was already, finished his PhD at the age of 20. And all of a sudden, threw everything off. And he went to be a mechanic to revenge his parents instead, because he felt that he's not accepted. He's good only for successing. If I'm not successful, I'm nobody. I don't want you. Understand? So really, now we talk in psychology, not just about IQ, but about emotional IQ. Right? It's very important. People think only about intellectual IQ, right? They don't think about emotional IQ, right? And today we know that the factors to success is much important. Your emotional cue rather than your intellectual cue. They checked with students. Even, well, if you're dummy, it's one thing. But if you're even mediocre, right? But very strong personality, you're going to do much better than really brilliant students with weak personalities. They found that the factors to success is to a much larger extent your personality than your intellectual powers. And really, this is very crucial, right? So when we want to push our kids to get achievements, we forget it's much more important to build their inner strength, their self-esteem. So now we come to this acceptance times encouragement, which is very crucial to the self-esteem. Next, the next thing that would influence my self-esteem would be the society. The society appreciates achievements, right? So my self-esteem would depend to a large extent on my achievements, right? So for that I make a sum, right? We make a sign, these kinds that it's summarize all the parts in this equation. So let's call it achievements times the meaning of each of them. So achievement I times its meaning times its importance, summarizing on all the areas of the achievement. Now in this, when I talk now about meanings, I don't mean just meanings. What I mean is important. I'll give it a factor. Let's call it AI. It's weight. And I would say that the sum of all A1 are 1. Namely, the weight, the importance that you give to this specific area. So actually you go over all the achievements, to each of one of them you give a certain weight, right? The sum of all the weights is just 1. And your self-esteem depends on all your achievements in all the areas, all right? Let's assume that you are the best in the class in julot. I don't know how to say it in English. Playing? Marbles. All right? It's great. Your achievement here is great. But the weight of that, is changing through life and it becomes very small. So even though it helped your self-esteem to a certain extent when you're a kid, but now, when you look at yourself, your self-esteem is stuck. Because the areas which you are very good at, the weight is very low, right? So it's very important your achievements, but at the same time the weight of each one of these achievements. Okay, let me try to rewrite it and summarize it in short, all the factors that we found so far, and write it all together. So we're talking now about that the willpower, I say equal even though I mean proportional, okay? Because we just talk proportional. To the difference between the desired, and desired is multiplied by its meaning, minus what exists multiplied by the objectivity factor, right? All this divided by the difficulties. The difficulties are factors, of course, of reality of one end, on one hand. On the other hand, it depends on your world point of view, your outlook on the world. Now, all this would be multiplied with your self-esteem. And your self-esteem, we say, this divided by the meaning of the difficulties. The self-esteem is the will to live, plus motherly love times fatherly love, plus the sum of all your achievements times its weight. The sum of all the weights is 1. You can see that when we talk about equations, even though we don't know to calculate them, it can teach us a lot about the willpower, because we know the interrelationship between the different components. So this is basically what we found so far. Now you can try to look into a relationship between the different parts. When I look about here the existing, and I look about the achievement, there is relationship between the two. What means the existing? Existing along this power, right? We're talking about a specific power I. And here I'm making a sum over J, right? So this is a sum, let's say, over J. Okay, should I invest in this? So I try to look at my willpower. I look at this, the existing is lousy, all right? Now, so actually, if it's lousy, you can see, and I heard good lectures that the desire is very important, all right? So the difference is big. So eventually, I would expect that my willpower to invest here would be big, all right? But now you see a very, very difficult vicious circle. When I come to my self-esteem, what happens? Let's assume that the weight I give to marriage is big. You can see that the weight here is related to the meaning here. So actually we found another relationship. That what I mean here by meaning is actually AI. You see? The weight, the importance that we give. You see, we found now the relationship between the different parts of the equation. Now, let's assume now that I give it a big weight, right? Good. So on one hand, when I give it a big weight, the desire becomes big, all right? But what happens to my self-esteem? Look here. Because, let's say I give it 90%, I say marriage is the most important thing. But once I give it 90%, multiplied by the lowest achievement, my self-esteem becomes very weak. Once my self-esteem becomes very weak, you can see that my willpower would go very low. So now I come to a terrible, if I would admit that marriage is important, my self-esteem would go down. And therefore I would not want. And I would feel lousy. Now I want to feel good. The most important thing of us, besides of achieving something, is to feel good. So actually, there is a prerequisite. Before wanting any other thing, we want to feel good. So actually, before wanting to succeed in a certain area, I want to feel good. So my first will is that my self-esteem would be high. You understand? This is my first will, prior to any other will. Now, let's assume I want to develop my willpower to invest in marriage, but for that I must pass a process that my self-esteem would go down. I'm not ready to. See what happens? You understand? So once I would give it a big weight, immediately my self-esteem would go down, and this I'm not ready to, so I'm not able to pass this process. So what would happen? Look how dangerous. So actually I'm going to distort the whole thing such that I would get high self-esteem. In order to get high self-esteem, I'm going to give high weights to areas where I'm successful, and to give very low weights to areas where I'm bad at. Okay? So actually I'm going to give very high weight to my career and very low weight to my marriage, such that I have now very good self-esteem. If I'm doing that, you can see that what would happen, my willpower to invest in my marriage would be very low. And I would blame her for everything, and that's it. Very simple. So now we come to a very dangerous process. So what would happen? People would invest more and more in areas where they are good at, and less in areas that are bad at. Understand? And you get distorted people. Just imagine, a tennis player, and you just imagine he neglect his left hand, just his right hand. A huge, strong right hand and very lousy left hand. You understand something is wrong with him, right? Because he invested only in the one end which is good, whatever it is, right? It's terrible. And we would call it caricatures. What is caricatures? In a caricature you might